Hey guys, it's Sam here, and Aston Villa and Crystal Palace have made their respective European finals and are on the cusp of European glory. Today I wanted to just discuss a little bit about the Villa and Forest game, as that's the one that I watched, but also mentioning Palace and mentioning some other things towards the end as well, because there's something that I wanted to talk about towards the end of the video that affects, predominantly affects the European teams anyway, teams that compete in Europe. But anyway, yeah, Aston Villa and Palace are through to the Europa League and the Europa Conference League, meaning that every European competition has an English finalist. So that's pretty good for English football. But unfortunately, one of them is Arsenal. So it's a shame, but oh well. Anyway, yeah, moving on to the Villa and Forest game itself. It was a very comfortable night for Villa. Forest did not turn up. I think they were still on the coach. They looked very, very nervous. They looked... The inexperience of playing in latter stages of European competitions, but also playing in Europe itself, caught up to them, I think. Let's not forget this was Forest's first European adventure in a very, very long time, over 30 years since the last European adventure they had. So, the inexperience caught up with them eventually, and I believe Aston Villa were in the Europa League semi-final last season and lost. So, they've been here, but also Villa have been in European competitions for the last few years. They get Europe, they understand it, they're able to handle the pressures of European football a little bit better than teams that are new to it, and that showed. When you've also got the Europa League master in Unai Emery, the manager that's won the competition God knows how many times, that's a massive factor as well. But they just didn't turn up. It was a very easy, comfortable night for Villa. First, second balls were won every time by Villa. Forest defence let the ball bounce so many times when, you're taught as a kid not to let the ball bounce. So the fact that they were doing that, they were giving the ball away too many times, and yeah, it was just inevitable that Villa were winning that game. From minute 1 to the 90th minute, it was just all Villa. Forest could not get anything going, and they didn't look like they were going to get anything going. And it is a shame. It's a real, real shame for them to go out like that. But I think when, yesterday and today, it'll hurt. It'll hurt the fans, it'll hurt the players, it'll hurt the manager, and it'll hurt the owner. But I think when the dust settles, they can be really, really proud of what they've achieved. I think if you went to any Forest fan and told them that, at the start of the season they'd make the semi-final, they would have taken that in a heartbeat. I think a lot of them were just saying, if we can get out of the league phase, you know, that would be a success. So I don't think any of them really truly believed that they could make the semi-finals. The fact that they have done, especially with the way that their season has gone, you know, 4 different managers, struggling in the Premier League for large parts of the season, getting to a European semi-final is not something to be, you know, it's not something to be taken lightly, you know. It's an incredible achievement, and they've given the Forest fans lifelong memories, you know. There are a large section of the fan base that would have never seen their team play in Europe, that were too young the last time they were in Europe to remember that, and they now have lifelong memories, incredible wins, incredible nights, incredible moments in that competition that you've given those fans. So yeah, it's something to be very, very proud of, and it's an achievement in itself, you know. Of course, when you get to a semi-final, you obviously want to win it, but ultimately, again, like I said, when the dust settles, they can be very, very proud of what they've achieved. Also, they were doing it without a lot of key players. They had a lot of injuries, and these are injuries to big key players. Gibbs White, Sangare and Dan Ndoye were on the bench. However, they were just simply there to make up the numbers. They weren't fit to play. You know, Vitor Pereira came out after the game and said they were literally there, you know, for morale, basically. They were never going to play. Even for penalties, they were never going to come on. You know, they weren't fit at all to play. Murillo was a massive risk, but Jai Cunha had cramps, so they did bring Murillo on, but that was a massive gamble. He wasn't fit to play, so you'll have to wait and see, you know, if they are fit for Newcastle. You've obviously got Hudson-Odoi and Ola Aina, who were out. So yeah, they have massive, massive players that were out injured, and it's a shame that we couldn't see a fully fit, 2 fully fit teams going at each other, you know, because I think that would be a different game. But obviously, you know, you don't take anything away from Aston Villa. They were incredible. They just fully deserve to be in the final, and you take what you can. You know, if the opposition has their injury problems, you take that as a bonus, really. You know, you don't feel sorry for them. You take that as your own personal gain. So, massive, massive credit to Aston Villa. But it is just a shame that we didn't get to see that competitiveness that we saw in the first leg. So, yeah. I think, ultimately, the two, they were evenly matched in the first leg, but the second leg, it was just way, way too easy for Villa. And they overcame it, and they will meet Freiburg in the final. Crystal Palace have Rayo Vallecano in their final, and of course Arsenal have PSG. So we could be looking at European dominance from England, a Champions League, a Europa League and a Europa Conference League winner from England. You know, that would be incredible, but you know, nothing is won yet. You've still got to go out there and do the business, even though Palace and Villa will be massive, massive favourites for their finals. They still have to go there and turn up, and ultimately they cannot let, they can't play the occasion. I think that's what Forest did last night. They played the occasion and not the game. The occasion got to them, and yeah, that's it is what it is. But also, something that has something that I think also needs to be mentioned is that trying to word it correctly, but it was a very no, do you know what? Scrap that. It's gone anyway. I've completely forgot what I was going to say. But going on to what I kind of mentioned about them, about Forest giving fans lifelong memories. I mean, I'm not a Forest fan, but even the Forest team has given me lifelong memories that I've shared with my dad. My dad took me to the quarter-final second leg against Porto and the semi-final first leg against Villa, seeing them win 1-0 in both of those games. Obviously happy for my dad, but going to the games with my dad and seeing the team play, seeing the team win, even though it doesn't bother me what happens, it's not going to ruin my night if Forest won or lost, but obviously, I want them to win for my dad, and getting to see them win and sharing those memories with him is something that I can take for the rest of my life, and even for a non-Forest fan, that is an incredible feeling, and incredible grateful feeling for that as well. So yeah, again, like I've said, they can be very, very proud of what they've achieved and what they've done this season. Now they just have to make sure that this was just a one-off, it was just that night, and they can't let this destroy their confidence, because they've been full of confidence. Before last night, they were unbeaten in the last 10. They completely changed their form around. I believe they're top of the form table right now. That's how good they've been since Pereira came in. And so, their fortunes have definitely changed. A massive afternoon and a massive game comes against Newcastle on Sunday. Before that, obviously West Ham play, and I believe if West Ham lose, I think Forest are safe, because then I don't know how many points they're behind. They might be 6 points behind, or maybe not, I don't know. I think if West Ham lose to Arsenal, I think that secures their safety, or maybe it's all but there because of their goal difference and they'd only need a point against Newcastle to be safe. I'm not sure. But, when you've got Newcastle United and Bournemouth, the last 3 games, they're in a very, very good place right now, where realistically, because of their goal difference, they're all but safe, you know, and they just have to make sure that they do just, you know, remove that from their mind. It's of course easier said than done. They'll obviously be devastated that they haven't got to the final, but you've got to remove that and just focus on those last 3 games. And it's probably also better that way, because you're not thinking about a European final. You now just have those last 3 games to make sure absolutely mathematically you are safe, and then you can focus on next season, building for another season in the Premier League, and hopefully, you know, making sure that you're nowhere near that relegation and you're back fighting, maybe even again for another European spot, you know. That's probably what they want to do. But anyway, that's everything I want to talk about in the first part. This second part now is still touching on that, but it's making... It's more talking about welfare, player welfare especially. Obviously, you know that Forest played on Monday, then they play on Thursday, and then they have to play on Sunday. So they will have played 3 games in a week. That should not be legal. Like, that shouldn't be possible. You know, that... how that is allowed to happen in the first place is beyond me. But the fact that that's technically illegal is again another thing entirely, because you can't play 3 games in a week, because there is no real rest period, because you have to train, you have to get focused for the next game. But if you're playing 3 games in a week, it's almost nothing, you know? It just doesn't make sense. And the fact that the Premier League and Sky and TNT keep getting away with this is beyond me. Because they've done it with my club, Liverpool. You know, the amount of times we've had a European game, even away from home, and then we're away from home in a European game, or even at home, 8 PM on a Wednesday, and then we play at 12:30 on a Saturday. You know, that's not on. You know, morally, that's not right. And we've seen for many, many years now, players and managers coming out and, you know, saying that this isn't okay, that this isn't right, that, you know, player welfare should be taken into account, and that this isn't, you know, they're not taking the player welfare into account, and they're not caring about players' health and conditions. But to then take it a step further and have a team play 3 games in a week is barbaric, you know? And, you know, clearly the complaining to the media and, you know, speaking about this out loud, it's not doing anything. Clubs and players, I think, have to take this a step further. And you're talking about court cases. Like, people might think that's a massive over-exaggeration. But if you want it to change, that's what you're talking about. You have to you have to threaten lawsuits. You have to threaten to sue the Premier League, to sue TNT, to sue Sky, for anything to possibly change. Because just coming out and complaining about this isn't doing anything, because they keep getting away with it. They keep doing it every single year. It's the same thing. You know, every year you have the players and you have the managers, they're complaining. Then every year the same thing just keeps happening. Because nothing's being done. You're not doing anything. Complaining to the media doesn't do anything. Yeah, it puts it out there, but they don't care. Premier League, TNT, Sky, all the other broadcasters, they don't care. They're like, and? We've got all the money in the world. What are you going to do? You've got to tell them what you're going to do. And you've got to actually do it. You know? That's at least my opinion. I could be completely wrong in that. And some people might think that that is a considerable exaggeration. But if you want these things to change, these are the things you have to do. You know, actions speak louder than words. Right now it's just words that are coming from the managers and the players. You have to speak action. Either, if you're not going to do the lawsuits and you're not going to take them to court, you've got to threaten boycotting games. You know, potentially even boycotting a season. Yes, you could be in trouble. But, again, you might get other teams to go, yeah, do you know what? We're going to join them in that boycott. And if too many teams threaten to boycott a season or a game, things are going to have to change, because they can't kick everyone out of the league. You know, they can't fine they can't, you know, they're not going to get everyone into trouble, especially if the Big Six join in, which I doubt it, because the Big Six don't care about any other team. Clearly, the Super League proved that. But, you know, they might if it involves them. You know, if we've seen it under, I mean, how many times did Jurgen Klopp come out and complain about it? He was really not happy. You've had Arne Slot even mentioning it as well. You know, I think Pep Guardiola's mentioned it. You know, this is where everything else goes out of the window, ultimately. If you want player welfare to be considered seriously by the Premier League, by TNT, by Sky, by the FA, by UEFA, and by FIFA, you are going to have to do more than just complain. You're going to have to do more than words, and you're going to have to do it sooner rather than later, otherwise it will never be done. You know, that's the simple thing. That's the thing that is more than frustrating for me as well, as a fan, where you want to see competitiveness, but ultimately you're not going to get competitiveness because they already play too many games. You know, we've said this for years and years. Players already play too many games in a season. If you add to them playing 3 games a week, or playing in such short spaces of time, you're not going to get the competitiveness because they've not had the rest they need. And teams will either rest players, so again the competitiveness has gone out of the window because players are being rested, or you play those same players but they're knackered and they might end up getting injured. And ultimately, this is a player's livelihood and career you're talking about. An injury, especially a big one, can destroy their career completely. You know? How many players come back the same from an ACL injury, from an Achilles injury? You know, this is what you're talking about that could happen, that just destroy a player's career, destroy their livelihood, and ultimately it could have been avoided if you cared more about the players that actually play in your league and play in your divisions. You know, I don't know. That's my thought process on it anyway. But again, I don't see that happening. I don't think they will do that. Because again, I think the players and the clubs will probably think that's too far of an exaggeration and it will never work. But then what do you do? How do you get these rules and laws to change? I don't see any other way. I really, really don't. You know, if you want it to be a serious issue, you have to treat it like a serious issue. And right now, they're not doing that. They're treating it like a mediocre issue. Maybe even less than a mediocre issue. Because, again, like I said, nothing's changed. The amount of managers and players that have complained over the years, yet nothing changes. It's because they know they can keep getting away with it, because what are you going to do? All you're going to do is bitch to the media. That doesn't work. The media don't care either. You know, you have to do it yourself. You as a club have to do it yourself. Because just complaining to the media or complaining to the Premier League, complaining to the FA, whatever, they don't care. They'll go, yeah, we'll look into it. They never do. Let's be honest, they never look into it. They don't care. Just straight away they'll see what it's about and go, in a bit, toss it in the bin. And go, yeah, we'll just send them a courtesy email saying, we'll look into it. It's never getting looked into. You've got to do it yourself. And that's my thought process on it anyway. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.